Hello and welcome, Professor Rasmussen, Chapter 6, Continuation of Long-Term Memory. The structure of it, you know where we're at. We left off on implicit memory, and that's where we're going to start up. However, I'm even going to give you a little bit more information on priming. Then we're going to go into procedural and then conditioning. The priming will take up a little bit of time, procedural a little bit, and then conditioning even just a little bit less. So it's going to go more to less to lesser. Alright, let's get it going. Implicit. That is non-declarative. You're unaware of this memory. Okay. Now, before we set the scene here, some of this research deals with individuals who suffer from Korsakoff's disease. Okay, it's Korsakoff syndrome. Now, Korsakoff syndrome is a degenerative disease that is caused by a lack of nutrients, primarily vitamin B1, because an individual is an alcoholic. Now, individuals who are alcoholics oftentimes have a poor diet. They primarily ingest and acquire their calories from alcohol. Now, what is happening here is the liver is processing the alcohol, and also even further, besides the poor diet, it's metabolizing the alcohol and it fails to metabolize the vitamins. So this even creates a bigger issue because even if they're getting enough vitamin B1, the liver is not going to metabolize the proper vitamins because it's processing so much of the alcohol. So this is creating a problem. Now, what's going to happen? Well, some of the parts of the brain involved with storing memories are going to atrophy. Now, a big thing here is a lot of times it's explicit information that is going to take a hit, meaning episodic as well as semantic knowledge. These people typically suffer from anterograde amnesia, where they cannot store new information. Vitamin B1 is readily had through some of those foods that you see there: pine nuts, various seeds, asparagus, broccoli, all which you can see there. There are supplements for it as well. However, many of these natural foods contain a plethora of vitamin B1. So, important essential ingredient to the health of parts of the brain in primary, the hippocampus and the surrounding tissue. So, when you don't have enough vitamin B1, parts of the hippocampus, parts of the thalamus, mainly hippocampus, are going to start to, experience problems. So, as you can see here, parts of this middle portion of the brain are starting to kind of wear away. Okay, now that's Korsakoff's. So what these researchers did in the first aspect of this talk is about priming. Again, this is positive priming. You're going to decrease your reaction time to a stimulus. You're going to become quicker. So 8 Korsakoff's disease patients, 2 alcoholics who did not have Korsakoff's, and then 3 controls. So a very small sample, but some of these are smaller samples in respect to these clinical samples where people have some sort of mental illness. So the Korsakoff's disease, they all had vitamin B1 deficiency. So they were shown various words, okay? So how much do you like this word? On a scale from 1 to 5. And then they were asked to recall the word. Then they were asked to fill in the word. So do a word fill-in task, all right? So the recalling the task is assessing the explicit, so how much can you recall, and then the word fill-in is the assessing the implicit, kind of like that word stem task, the word stem completion task. So what the researchers found is that in respect to those individuals who had the various diseases such as Korsakoff's versus the alcoholic versus the control, as you see the amnesic. This is the amnesic patients in this this white one here. What you see is the main differences in respect to numbers of words recalled versus the words primed. What you can see is the control group versus the alcoholics. They perform pretty much similarly, okay, especially in the number recalled. You can see the alcoholic group who was the amnesic as well, the anterograde amnesia. They actually recalled very few words in comparison to their counterparts, suggesting that they did not have the ability to recall. explicit memory. However, when you look at it in respect to priming, when they're able to do the words, the word stem completion task, you see that both groups, actually all three of the groups, were no different from one another in that the control group, the alcoholic group, as well as the amnesic group, the group who had anterograde amnesia, they all performed about the same in respect to priming. So this is a disassociation between individuals who have um, between individuals on recall, so explicit versus priming. Okay, so nice evidence to suggest that individuals who have this anterograde amnesia, especially in this respect to Korsakoff's, but Korsakoff's anterograde amnesia is the same as just anterograde amnesia. These individuals, they fail to recall information, so their explicit memory is gone, but their priming ability remains stable, suggesting that priming is there, implicit is there. Okay, so another example of positive priming. This is a classic study with Warrington and Rijnskrantz, 1968. All right, so I'm going to show you some pictures here. I'll explain the task first. So these participants all had anterograde amnesia. All right, these are incomplete pictures. So they would show them incomplete pictures starting from the very least picture to a very detailed picture. I'll show you this in just a second. What the researchers did is they assessed the individual's ability to guess what picture they were looking at, to be able to recognize the picture day after day. Okay, so this assessed the episodic recall. Overall, what you see is that these individuals saw this. So any idea what you're looking at here? No, probably not, right? Any idea? No? Any idea? Yeah, so now you're getting to a point where, yeah, you definitely know what it is. It's an airplane, right? So as you can see, as time went on, as the trials, this is the trial, like one of a plane, and they would show them A, B, C, D, and E. And as the days would increase, what the researchers would find is that these participants were able to guess earlier what this object is, because they are being primed from these days before. Now, here's another task here. Yeah, it's a cake. So there you have it. So kind of cool stuff. And what researchers found is that the days of training, the error scores would go down, obviously. The performance improves even though this person doesn't remember the training. So they didn't remember what they were being trained on, but they're somehow remembering what these objects are to some extent. And researchers believe that while they don't know what these objects are, or they don't remember the events, they can remember what it is because of priming. They're being primed these days before, and somehow that information is sticking or activating their future. It's going to activate their future memories and knowledge in the future. Okay, so performance improves even though the person doesn't remember the training. So this is an example of positive priming with these objects, with actual pictures. All right, so let's actually look at procedural. We'll actually do this in the future, so let's actually just skip that slide. We'll skip this slide. I'll talk about this in class, matter of fact, this will be good. And let's actually just go to classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is interesting work that researchers have done. A lot of this has used the human eye blink paradigm. Now, this is very, very massive in the 60s and 70s of the human eye blink paradigm, even before that. But basically, it's how you kind of, maybe you got your eyes tested, the pressure of your eyes tested. You're at the eye doctor, the ophthalmologist, or the optometrist, and the individual who is the technician who is testing the pressure of your eyes. You have to sit forward, and then there's that puff of air. A lot of places don't do the puff of air anymore. There's other ways that researchers and eye doctors can actually assess the pressure of your eye. But that puff of air Oftentimes what happens from that puff of air is the individual will blink, and this is automatic. This is an automatic response. This is a reflex, okay? So researchers took this knowledge about this automatic reflex and they turned this into a classical conditioning paradigm where they would provide a tone, beep, and then there would be a puff of air, and then automatically that would make the individual blink. So if you do this through time, tone, puff, blink, tone, puff, blink, tone, puff, blink, the individual would have a blink to the tone. So in the future, the tone goes on, boom, the individual is going to start blinking to the tone as opposed to the puff of air. Why? Because they assume that the tone is going to predict the puff of air, and then therefore they're going to blink. So the tone becomes the conditioned stimulus, the blink becomes the conditioned response to the tone. So what researchers did actually is in individuals who had anterograde amnesia, they assessed them on their ability to learn this task, and they learned this task quite well. Actually, some of this really interesting work was that individuals could remember this tone and then blink, this conditioned stimulus, many days later, sometimes weeks later after the training episodes, while they did not remember anything explicitly. They had no memory for what the tone meant, but they're automatically blinking. Okay? So this is suggesting that these individuals are doing this action without conscious awareness. So this is some really neat research to suggest that you can learn unconsciously, and that is what classical conditioning really is. At the heart of it is an unconscious process. If it's conscious, it's not classical conditioning. You're learning this episodically or semantically, but if you are doing something, unconsciously to, some sort of classical conditioning paradigm, well, that is unconscious, that is implicit in nature. So this is a nice example of how researchers have looked at anterograde amnesia and these people who fail to store material explicitly, but they can store information implicitly, even in a classical conditioning sense. Alright, cool. So that was it. That's priming. Procedural memory I really just want to talk about in class. I was going to talk about it here, but I think it's just going to be a lot better served by talking about it in class. And then conditioning. We just talked about conditioning and how people and dogs and all sorts of animals are conditioned, and this is on an unconscious basis. Alright, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks and take care.